So we've termed this the Cancer Center of the Future, and this afternoon is being sponsored by the Center for Translational Cancer Research, which right now most of you are probably saying, oh, what's that? Well, it's a partnership of these organizations, and just by way of background, we've recognized for quite a while that cancer research is a strength citywide, and that's reflected in a number of documents, including strategic plans of the university, of Schulich, Lawson, cancer program. And there are established links between clinicians and scientists, and we've been able to establish interdisciplinary teams with translational focus. We've been able to establish citywide training programs like the the CIHR strategic training program, but also others that link in and link to cancer. And lots of rounds and seminars sponsored by different research groups and entities. And I think, and really sort of I think as a flagship event is we have our Oncology Research and Education Day, and that's always gratifying because it brings together, you know, between 100 and 200 people for a day of talks and research and just collegial interaction, which kind of is a measure of the amount of cancer research activity citywide. One day we can sort of get a snapshot of that. So we wanted to try and capitalize on this, and so in 2009 and 10, there was we sort of undertook a citywide strategic planning process to say, well, how do we build on these strengths and try to formalize it and keep moving forward? And out of that, one of the key recommendations was to try and pursue formal center status within the university. And so the focus of the strategic planning group for some time was then devoted to working with UWO to really meet their criteria for center status. And about around this time last year, we had confirmation from UWO that the Center for Translational Cancer Research was acknowledged as a formal UWO center, and it's a partnership between UWO, the Schulich School of Medicine, Dentistry, Department of Oncology, Lawson, and the London Regional Cancer Program have all come to the table to help sort of get this nascent center off the ground. So really, what are we hoping to do? And there's sort of a one-pager at the tables that sort of gives a little bit more detail around this, but really we wanted to expand and really enable translational cancer research citywide that could really start to answer some big questions or address some big questions that we could really do this uniquely in London to make a difference in the lives of people with cancer. And we saw that the major goals of the center were to really a communication role in terms of making sure that people can work effectively together, because there's a lot of there are a lot of people engaged in the cancer research enterprise citywide, and just making sure that the right people get together to move projects forward, and how can we enable more and more research teams to form that are building and incorporate strength citywide, and also playing an advocacy and an advisory role when it comes to, okay, where's the biggest bang for our buck? If we have limited time and resources, where can be the biggest bang for our buck in terms of moving this forward citywide, and working with our funding partners and foundations and things to really keep translational cancer research on the radar and try and help grow the resources available. So what we were hoping out of this day, I mean, these are not really goals, but they are some questions that I thought we could try to get some reflection on. And the questions were, okay, where's research going locally and regionally, internationally, that we need to consider within London if we want to continue to move down this path? You know, what elements do we need? And this may be physical infrastructure, maybe changes in our operations or how we relate to each other to make it successful in this regard. And what do we need to really put those elements in place? And one of an impetus to meet now, and I think Brian Orr will be speaking to this, is you know, one of the things that will be coming forward in the next number of years and is recognized now is we have to expand the clinical facility for cancer care in London. So the cancer center, the LRCP, needs to grow. So there'll be construction. So there's a big investment that's going to be made. And as we start down that road, what is apparent to me is that investment isn't. It's as much about how we work and what we're planning to do as it is about, do we need, X number of clinics, or we need, this many of offices or whatever. So really, if we can think ahead about what research would look like, we can then provide some advice and some guidance as projects like center expansions occur to really make sure they're best positioned to advance the academic mission as well as the clinical mission. So that's just sort of one example of something coming down the pipe that hopefully will be informed by some of the dialogue today, and certainly there are key leaders from the cancer program here listening intently. So with that, I will introduce our first speaker, who is Brian Orr. He's our VP of Cancer Services at the London Health Sciences Centre and London Regional Cancer Program, and I'm sure will give us a bit more context as to where the cancer program is going clinically and from an academic perspective.
It's a pleasure to be here, and certainly welcome this opportunity. As Glenn mentioned, this is a great time in thinking about where we're going and how we can do this better in the future. And so I'm just going to go through a few things to highlight, because there's going to be lots of discussion about what these mean, and I'm the last person to say what kind of research we should be doing, so I want to really talk about the context or the environment that we want to create moving forward. Wanted to put this in the context of the existing vision and mission for the London Regional Cancer Program. In fact, the black is we actually managed to write a short and simple vision statement, and that's been around actually for a number of years, which really talks to us as an academic center, that it is in fact the combination of research, education, and patient care. And so that is the absolute commitment of the London Regional Cancer Program, to not only build on that, but to enhance that going forward. As we go, we have a long mission statement, so I've just done extracts that are relevant to the conversation around research in particular, just to emphasize as a context for our discussions today. Really, one of the first is that in fact we recognize that it starts with basic research, it goes through clinical research, it goes through all of the stages right to the end. But when you think about it from a hospital's perspective, I think about it from a patient's perspective, all of the work doesn't count until we've actually improved the care delivered to patients on a day-to-day basis. That's the real end point. And I know from lots of things in the research, there are trip points along that journey where we have historically, at many research environments, tripped up in that ability to keep that moving forward smoothly, specifically and often at the last stage, which is taking the knowledge and translating it into day-to-day practice. And from my perspective, that is one of the areas that I believe we need to focus on and excel at as we move forward. And there are a lot of things there. One of the things we've identified on that is we are a large academic center in a small community. So one of the things we got to be better at, that I believe in, is we've got to out-collaborate everybody else in the country, which means we've got to work together. We've got to work as one team, regardless of where people are in the organization. So that's one of the things that's important to me about where Glenn's talking about us going. This is not about what we do at LRCP or what's done in any other location. It's what we do collectively together across everybody that's really critical from my perspective. Well, the education, supporting the journey. The other thing that I think we've got an asset that we haven't understood how to make use of is we are a large academic regional cancer center with responsibility for care delivery across the largest geographic area in southern Ontario. And so we have, for some of our areas, a catchment area of up to 3 million people that we're supporting, between 1 and 3 million people. So it's more than just, in my view, what we do in London or we do in patients just in the cancer center. It is the opportunity to really reach out and both make use of that larger population from a research point of view, but also the opportunity to work with others as we go down those paths. So So we have started the functional planning. Those who have been around for a while know that since probably about 1997, this organization, LHSC, as well as St. Joe's, has been working on implementing restructuring. We talk about the 30 years it's taking us to close South Street. It's been a long time. One of the areas, and probably the only major clinical area that was not covered by the restructuring efforts in the last 20 years, has been cancer. We're the only group that's gone through all the changes with no impact from those changes. There's been some minor expansion in our center. And so it's been identified by LHSC as a priority. So we started this spring with the first stage in a long-term functional planning to expand the cancer center or build a new cancer center here in London. That's what Glenn was referring to. We're at the very early stage. In the next 12 months, we're going to have to get into the detailed planning. So this is really timely in the sense that we've outlined this in broad strokes. In fact, they're going to be in later this month going through our center, and the architects are going to be taking a look at what we currently got. But in the next 12 months, we've got a golden opportunity to really think about what does the future cancer center need to look like in London. And so from my point of view, there's a number of goals that I have for this. One is we got to have a cancer center that's able to take care of cancer patients till at least 2040, and that sounds like a long way away, but we're over 22 years in our current cancer center, so it's not like they last for 10 years. We got to build something that's going to be around for a while as we move forward. And what struck me is the last thing I want to do is build a new cancer center that replicates how we used to treat patients. So what I want us to do is design a cancer center that's designed around where we think we're going in terms of the kinds of ways we're going to have to care for and treat. What are the novel ways? And how do we build a cancer center that can incorporate and accommodate those? Because that's how we get research into practice, is by doing that. And it's going to be at least a generation. So where are we going in all of the broad areas? And how do we build a center that we can facilitate, reconfigure, and put together that really makes that happen as we go forward? I think the third thing is the seamless integration. We have got to, and I think it's one of our strengths here in London, is the connection that we have physically and among others between research, education, and patient care. There are a number of people in this room that speak about that publicly. I think that's a valuable strength. I remember years ago looking up, and there was reading an article on the work that was done on indicating where do people come from who win Nobel Prizes. And what the research showed was when they were doing their research, not when they got awarded, because that's a very different time period, a disproportionate number of Nobel Prize winners in science were working in small to medium research organizations because of the informal interaction that can happen. You can be too big. And so I think one of the things we got in London is you need to be big enough, but you don't want to be too big. And I think we've got a real opportunity to exploit the fact of our size and our opportunities to work together. And I think the other one is how do we distribute that across southwestern Ontario? Is how do we actually do all three pieces of that very well across a very large geographic area? So my view of this is I want London to be the nationally recognized academic cancer center in Canada. We can be really, I'm being kind of modest because I could have written the world, but we'll start with Canada. I was thinking about how I would measure that, and I can say that if Princess Margaret started worrying about what we're doing here, I think we're making some great success in this direction. So my question then is, how do we become the best in the country at going bed to bed from the bench to the bedside? How, in fact, can we do that better than anyone else in the country in doing that? That's both what we develop in London, but taking other people's ideas and turning them into reality as well. We can't do that in all the possible areas of cancer. So, and I think Glenn identified this. So the key question in my mind is, what are those areas of focus that London has the strengths or can build the strengths that we can really focus our attention? I think we've got to focus on that one and get that one nailed down as we move forward. The cross-discipline, the collaboration, I think is absolutely critical. We know in space design that how you design space can facilitate or discourage collaboration. There's a lot of work on that, and so So it's not just how much space we have, it's how we build it, how we interact and build it to facilitate what we want to do. How can we be faster at doing this than anyone else? And how can we, as a regional cancer programs in London, treat that as an advantage? What are the critical things that give us an advantage in London because we're in London as opposed to being located somewhere else in Canada? And those are the kinds of things we need to think about from a strategic advantage as we move forward. So that's it. Hopefully that provides a bit of context for the discussion this afternoon.